I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting today inside the county boardroom because earlier today the chair and the mayor of Portland held a joint news conference to unveil a new plan to combat homelessness in our area. They're hoping it makes a big difference and that it changes the way you think about it. It's taken nearly 8 years and $1 billion, but it does look like there's finally a unified plan to work on the homeless crisis in Multnomah County. The changes announced today all involve the Joint Office of Homeless Services, which is responsible for the most of the homeless response in our area. Over the last several years, the office has grown exponentially and, well, so have the problems. 2 separate audits last summer slammed the office for lacking clear strategy, vision, and measurable outcomes, and more. But now, Mayor Ted Wheeler and County Chair Jessica Vega Pederson say that's all going to change. And moving forward, the county and the city will work together to have a cohesive strategy.
And we know that this is what the community expects us to do. We're united in our determination to find compassionate as well as effective solutions to lift up the most vulnerable in our community. This marks the beginning of a new relationship, one that is reinvigorated, one that is collaborative, one that will improve these operational systems, build more options, and provide more services on site at shelters. Now, let's not kid ourselves. None of this will be easy, but we are far more likely to succeed when we work together. This is what Portland needs, and it needs to be done with urgency.
More specifically, at the heart of these new agreements is the establishment of a homelessness response system that includes joint goal making, strategic formation, and oversight over the larger system of care. And there are 3 keys to effectively creating and implementing this response system. First, key performance metrics to assess the work of the Joint Office of Homeless Services. We have to be pointing in the same goals and outcomes and driving there with force and discipline. This includes identifying a baseline number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness as of January 2024. It includes refining our data collection and data management systems to provide quarterly reports on our goals. And it includes making sure all of our providers are contributing data and information to our data system so that we can establish and maintain daily shelter availability.
So how about that? The 2 sides are going to join forces, try to knock down the silos that are keeping things separate, and then set key metrics that we and you can use to hold them all accountable. Now, I can hear some of you grumbling that it should have been that way from the beginning, which, yep, I agree, it's true. But this is the reality of what we have. Both sides, City Council and the County Commission, must still approve the plan. It'll keep the sides working together, though, and funding the Joint Office of Homeless Services for another 3 years if both sides do approve it. And since we feel no reservations about criticizing both sides when they do something that we think is dumb, I think we should also take a moment now to give them credit for getting to this new agreement and this plan. Well done. I hope that it works. Let's dig into the details and explain what's going to happen. Big picture, the agreement would bring together all the county and city departments, directors who work in behavioral health, housing, poverty, homelessness, and criminal justice. It also spells out specific metrics. They would identify a baseline number of people living on our streets this coming January. And then the goal is going to be to get at least 50% of those people into housing by the next 2 years. So by December 31st of 2025. Then to achieve a 15% increase in the number of people who leave shelter for housing by the end of 2025. Also to ensure that at least 75% of people who moved into permanent supportive housing keep that housing for at least 24 months after they get there. They would also issue quarterly reports on the goals and eventually move city-controlled homeless projects like the outdoor camps and the tiny villages. Those would move under the control of the joint office. So there are some specific metrics that we can hold them accountable to, and we do plan to. And yes, I did notice that they gave themselves 2 years to hit some of those goals. But again, at least right now, it feels like a little bit of progress. The county chair said it's a move away from the bad old days of fighting with the city.
Today, we are taking a huge step to correcting that. The proposal we're sharing with our commissioners turns the page on a relationship that has been fraught with misunderstanding and mistrust, and worst of all, a system that is not as effective as it should be. And it moves us towards a genuine partnership rooted in collaboration and cooperation.
In case you didn't know, it's an open secret that city leaders and past county leaders did not play well together and had several disagreements over homeless issues. Today, Mayor Ted Wheeler said things are much better. For example, the county has kicked in $20 million for the mayor's large outdoor camping sites.
But the chair and I, we don't want to just create shelter anymore. Shelter alone won't work with a chronically sick population. It has to be combined with case management and services and navigation. And so the homeless services structure that we're talking about today and jointly funding, probably with the county putting a lot more in just because they have the SHS dollars and we don't, is a truly unified structure that makes sense for the kinds of problems that chronically homeless people are currently experiencing on the street. These are not folks who are exclusively people who have lost jobs or lost housing due to rent increases, although there are plenty of people like that. We are dealing with a much more chronically sick population that needs intensive services and case management. And for once, we're going to be sitting at the table at the same time, hearing the same information, looking at the same data, and brainstorming on where do we want to prioritize our budget, what services do we want to prioritize, who does what when, and how is it all funded.
All right, time for you to let us know what you think about all this. I'm hopeful that it works. What about you? Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a message. The number's 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Now to Portland City Hall, where the process towards a brand new form of city government continues, well, or does not continue to move forward, as was the case today. Today, city commissioners voted down the creation of new job classifications for the new government, at least for now. The charter transition team wanted to create 5 new classifications and salary ranges for those. A city administrator who'd be paid starting at just over $268,000, an assistant city administrator who'd be paid starting $139,000, deputy city administrators who will be in charge of the city's new service areas, which are replacing city bureaus. The team was proposing paying them starting at $204,000. They were also proposing adding mayor's aide positions, $90,000 for a senior aide, $71,000 for the other position. They say the salaries for city administrator was drawn from comparable sized cities, including Vancouver, Tacoma, and Sacramento. The other positions were based on jobs that already exist in the city of Portland. The team wanted the council to approve the positions as an emergency ordinance so they would go into effect right away, and the team could stay on track for the transition plan. But that rush and the cost made city commissioners uncomfortable.
I'm certainly concerned about the budgetary impacts when I look at the total weight of these deputies and frankly the whole hog when we talk about city administrator, deputies, and assistants here.
I would suggest going forward as we are in meetings about the budget, the challenges of our upcoming budget, as we're building the scaffolding, as you say, I think our process needs to be improved where we do crosswalk with the budget office. And I think the budget office in this presentation would have been really helpful today for me getting this information with an emergency ordinance on it to just be more at ease with moving this along.
Well, the team told the commissioners that when it comes to creating new positions and compensation, it's typical for a budget officer to get involved after the fact.
It is not very typical for budget departments to be involved before those structures are created. The role that central budget has played is in partnership with Class Comp and in partnership with bureaus at the city, so that once the actual positions are created and when pay rates are determined, then central budget office can review that, and they do have input, they do have approval on whether or not it is reasonable and fiscally responsible to move forward with what's being proposed.
They also pointed out that in most cases, people are hired closer to the starting salary, not the higher end of the pay range. But the cost of the new form of government has been a concern. The new government is expected to cost about $24 million a year to run. That's up significantly from the $10 million a year it takes right now. In the end, commissioners voted against today's emergency ordinance. They decided to change it to a first reading, which means it's been introduced and commissioners can consider it later. We contacted the transition team. They say they're working on responding to the commissioners' concerns, and they'll bring it back for a second reading next week. Now let's take a minute to check in on some of your thoughts regarding our big story from last night. Our bridge expert, Anthony Masuk, walked us through some of the possible changes on the way for several of the interchanges leading up to the I-5 bridge. There are 7 in total, and all will be remodeled in one way or another when those new bridges are built. And it's going to cost $2 to $3 billion for those interchanges. But it also means that commutes for many of you will be changing as well. Roger wrote to us, "Thank you for explaining and showing how complicated it will be to get all this done around the bridge. Hope I live long enough to see it and drive it when completed." Jim had a similar thought. 11 years ago, we lived in the Bridgeton neighborhood off Marine Drive the last time the new bridge was proposed and failed. I said at the time it would not be built in my lifetime. So here we are again. I'm not any younger. I still don't think I'm going to see it completed. And we want to thank Kathy for this kind note. Pat, you almost apologized for bringing us this very interesting and complicated story on how we'll get on and off the new bridge. The video showing that will change and why was very enlightening. Although these were presented as ideas in the works, it's stuff that will certainly be impacted by. Thanks for the important information. Thank you, Kathy. And we'll end on this email from Gail, who kept it short and sweet. "You want to know what my opinion is on the new bridge? Arrgh!" Thanks for all those comments, and you can bet that whenever we learn new information about the bridge project, which is sure to affect all of us for years and years and years to come, we'll bring it to you right here on The Story. Coming up next on The Story, who doesn't love a leaked federal document? In this case, well, the answer is a bunch of Republican members of Congress from the Pacific Northwest. It all has to do with the lower Snake River dams and what the Biden administration says it would be willing to do if those dams were taken out. We'll explain what's going on when The Story returns. There's been an ongoing battle to get rid of the 4 hydropower dams in the lower Snake River. Now a leaked federal document reveals that the feds would be willing to help build clean energy projects to replace those dams. In other words, plans are taking shape for those dams to possibly be removed. In order for that to happen, Congress would need to agree, which some speculate is not likely. But utility agencies and a group of Pacific Northwest Republicans in Congress are now sounding the alarm. They're saying the dams are essential for agriculture, flood control, transportation, as well as electricity. On the other side, conservationists and Native American tribes say the dams are the primary reason that salmon runs are nowhere near what they used to be. The leaked document does not describe a final decision, just preparations. Erica Zucco with our Environment Northwest team explains.
The document is marked as part of confidential mediation dated November 2nd of this year. But Republican representatives say it appears to create a, quote, Pacific Northwest tribal energy program that would be involved with producing alternate power sources if the dams were breached. The Public Power Council, which represents consumer-owned utility companies, including more than 30 in Washington, says the possible plan would be expensive to fulfill, with costs that could be passed on to customers.
It would be a massive impact in terms of the rates, in terms of the impacts to our grid reliability, and ultimately to the fabric that we know it as a power system here in the Northwest.
The White House told the Associated Press in a statement that negotiations are ongoing and the U.S. government is, quote, developing a package of actions and commitments that it is discussing with all parties involved in the mediation. Northwest tribes have been calling for dam removal for years, arguing it's the responsibility of the federal government to meet treaty obligations and restore salmon runs. That fight prompting protests and a conference this fall.
What we're trying to preserve is elemental to the life of everyone.
Opponents of removing the dams maintain it would hurt communities near the dams with impacts to power and agriculture.
And today, Oregon Congressman Cliff Benz announced a hearing next week for the congressional subcommittee that he chairs, which is Natural Resources on Water, Wildlife, and Fisheries. His hearing will be all about the leaked document and the Snake River dams. His office calls the plans in the document, quote, destructive, politicized, unfair, and deceptive, and that it's a direct attack on clean energy production and navigation in the Northwest. We'll keep you posted in this story as it develops. It's a process that is sure to take years and months to really fully develop. Had trouble saying the end of that one, didn't I? Still to come on the story, Washington State, with its beautiful scenery and booming cities, is meant to be the peak of progress when it comes to protecting the environment. But is the state anywhere close to accomplishing some of its environmental goals? We're looking into areas that are falling far short, and why a government group that was created for the sake of accountability appears to be offering anything but. Details when the story returns. We talk about accountability a lot on this show. If you're going to say that you're going to do something, I think you should do it. And if it doesn't happen, well, you should at least explain why. We find that accountability can often be missing when it comes to government, kind of at all levels. Our sister station in Seattle recently looked into Washington State's reputation as an environmental leader. And although the PR on environmental work appears to be working quite well, the results reveal a very different story, and one the state leaders apparently want to keep quiet. Susanna Frame has the story.
Washington State, we're the poster child for environmental excellence.
We're the first generation to feel the sting of climate change.
In 2019, Governor Jay Inslee ran for president on the platform.
Defeat climate change. Climate change is real. Defeating climate change. The demon of the climate crisis.
But here at home, the King 5 investigators have found Washington isn't meeting many of the state's identified environmental goals. State records show over the last decade, we're recycling less, not more. Greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, the state's biggest carbon polluter, are up, not down. And so are overall carbon emissions, despite a state law requiring a reduction.
A lot of areas were failing badly.
Todd Myers is the environmental director at the Washington Policy Center, a conservative think tank.
Critical that state government and politicians live up to their promises and meet those goals so that the people of the state of Washington get what they voted for, get what they're paying for. That's critical.
The state is meeting some environmental goals, including the number of registered electric vehicles like this one. The governor set a goal of 50,000 by 2020. We've smashed that with about 150,000 on Washington roads right now. On this one, the state is not leading by example. 2 years ago at a UN climate summit in Scotland, the governor announced a bold step, an executive order mandating 100% of the state-owned fleet of vehicles be electric by 2035. His office sent out this press release touting the move to help slash carbon emissions. But a new state report shows Washington agencies are way off track and unlikely to meet that goal.
It's challenging to do it, but it's very important that we follow through on our commitments because the climate doesn't care what we say, it cares what we do. This is a delivery van. This probably gets maybe 14 miles to the gallon.
Matthew Metz is the founder of Cultura, a nonprofit dedicated to eliminating gasoline use in the U.S.
And they're asking the private sector to make a lot of change for the climate, which needs to be done, but the state also really needs to do it.
My name is Mandeep Connell, and I'm a director of Results Washington.
When Inslee came into office 10 years ago, he created a state agency, Results Washington, to set, measure, and publicize state goals such as environmental targets.
And the intent was results-driven government.
State government expert John Bernard was the governor's advisor in setting up Results Washington.
The purpose of it was to get focused on measurable improvement. Measure and see if things are working, set targets.
To actually prove if the state's doing better.
Right.
Prove it.
Right. We're spending a lot of money. Does that money get what we're trying to get done?
But over the years, Results Washington has watered down the results. They've scrubbed most of the environmental goals and measurements from their website. Instead, it now features pages of state reports, links to federal information, graphs, maps, and spreadsheets.
I think it's a lost opportunity. If you are wanting to be results driven and you don't keep score, it's literally impossible to know if you're doing well, making progress. It's literally like playing basketball without keeping score.
The director of Results Washington sent us a statement saying they changed course to make data collection more effortless and timely, and they're evaluating their process to make it easier to access all the information at first glance.
Can you tell by looking at this if the state is meeting its goals?
No. On a Capitol Hill sidewalk, we tested the site out with citizens.
This is Results Washington. How are we doing in meeting our goal?
I mean, it doesn't really say anything about goals.
You see, I'm just not, like there's so many numbers.
No one we spoke with understood how the state stands on environmental goals.
From looking at this website, can you tell what the goal is for our greenhouse gas emissions?
No, not at all.
A lot of numbers.
A lot of numbers. No information about where we're going with it.
We wanted to ask Governor Inslee about the missed targets and Results Washington. His office turned us down twice. Hey, Governor Inslee, it's Susanna Frame from King. How are you? So we caught up with the governor at a public event in October. Sir, I've been trying to organize an interview with you to talk about just a quick one, about our state's climate policies and our targets. And as you know, most of them haven't been met. And so I'm just curious. But I've tried and I've been told
can we
no.
get an interview with her? She wants to talk about the climate policy. Okay. Can we arrange that? Yeah, let's do that. So we sit down and have
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
that
do
would be
it.
great, Governor.
Yeah. Great,
Thank you.
Despite that commitment for an interview, it didn't happen. Inslee's office said he was too busy and that King 5 was off the mark by not focusing on the governor's climate policy wins. Critics say policy is one thing, results and being transparent about them are another.
Government exists to help make our world a better place. If I don't keep score, how do I know if I made a difference? And we need them to make a difference. We need the accountability, not just for the people who work in the state, but who govern and who make the laws. They need to be accountable.
Susanna Frame, awesome investigative reporter from Seattle. It's worth noting that since the story first aired, Governor Inslee's press secretary contacted Susanna, said, no, the governor really does want to talk and do the interview. So they're working to schedule something now. We'll let you know if it ends up happening. In the meantime, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember the story, our collective story? Well, that never ends. The good stuff is coming your way next, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow, 6:30.